What's up, gamers? Welcome to episode 47 of the Business Casual Gamers podcast. As always, we're the show focused on gamers with jobs, families, who have things to do in real life. I'm Aaron Connick, joined as always by Chris Smoke. Chris, how are we doing this week?
Oh, I am excellent. This is going to be a great show.
This is going to be awesome. So on today's show, we're going to be talking about something that we've been touching on at various points throughout our show's history. We're going to be talking about the collector's editions.
Oh, yeah.
Turning the experience into the prized possession.
The ultimate swag edition.
Exactly. And we're also going to come back and talk about my game assignment this week, which is going to be a different one. Culdcept Revolt for the 3DS. Going to be excited to talk about a game that I'm guessing many people have not played before and have heard about. So with that, before we get into our topic of the week, let's talk about how you can find us on the interwebs. Easiest place to find this show and all of our content is going to be at our website at businesscasualgamers.com. You can find everything there, links to every place we are on the interwebs. Hit us up on Twitter at BISCasualGamers. I will be posting some shots of my son schooling me in Gran Turismo Sport with a soon-to-be newly minted obligatory steering wheel that has to go along with it.
You have to have one.
You got to have
to have. And you have to let me know how it is.
I will. So I'll be posting shots of that. Also, find us on YouTube at search for Business Casual Gamers. We posted the Naruto Shippuden video not long ago. We'll have some more content posted
Coming
there
soon.
shortly.
Yep.
We've had some really good feedback on the Naruto videos, so hopefully you'll like what you see with the next one. And also, if you like this show or you've been listening to us for any length of time, really the best way you can support this show is to give us a rating on iTunes or whatever other place that you listen to this podcast. Really, at the end of the day, this isn't an ad-supported show. It's not something where, other than having available merch, it is not something that we try to hit you up for dollars, but we really do appreciate spreading the word to other like-minded potential business casual gamers. We really appreciate the feedback, and it helps us out a lot. So once you get done listening to the show, take 2 seconds, hit us up on with a rating. Any comments you could leave are always appreciated. So with that, let's get into the meat of our discussion topic of the week. So Chris, throughout the history of this show, for people who have been longtime listeners, they have heard of all of the frivolity and the many purchases that we have charted throughout the course of collector's editions, paraphernalia, or countless other physical things that have absolutely nothing to do with playing the games that we talk about. They are awesome. So the obvious question becomes, why do we keep hanging on to all of these physical objects in a world that is increasingly moving away from anything physical and trying to make everything digitally available immediately? So, there are times, Chris, where I think, are we just the old-timers that have been in the hobby so long that we're walking uphill in the snow both ways to get to Electronics Boutique to buy? Are we that guy? Have we become that guy? Or is there something more to it that we have to explore? So on today's show, we're really going to explore the evolution of something that is honestly relatively newer to the hobby in the form of the collector's editions, and really discuss why they've gone from a non-existent thing to a real mainstay within the gaming world. So let's go back, Chris, to kick this off to really what I'll call the origin story. Now, Chris, do you remember when you went to, whether it was your local Sears, as we know, your town center mall, Sears, and you said, I've got my eye on that shiny new game. Talk me through your decision, Chris, on were you looking at a collector's edition versus a regular edition back in your NES days?
There was just the game. There was just the game.
There was
nothing else. You might hope if you're a person, and you're really lucky, you might get something like a gold cartridge. That was pretty unheard of. Actually, a funny part, you have those Tengen games that were in different kind of black cartridges that were actually unlicensed. And
the bootleg.
Yeah, constantly in the state of lawsuit, which was funny. But as kids, you didn't know. You thought they were kind of cool. They loaded a little bit differently and such. But yeah, there really wasn't such a thing. You bought the game, you got an instruction manual. If you were super, super, super lucky, you might get, like Zelda, either like a gold cartridge or maybe a map or something like that.
You were
right?
super happy with the map, or maybe an instruction manual that had some artwork, some background story that was cool. But at the end of the day, stores at the time were not going to stock more than one SKU or one form of the game. Now, granted, publishers weren't making them. I mean, this is still at a point in time when we came into the hobby where it was still kind of a new thing, but you certainly didn't have a fan base built out that was demanding anything more than just your game.
Right.
If you published something that people wanted, you were just happy that they bought the game. You weren't trying to figure out how to sell them any multitude of editions. Now, I think we both remember, really where if you had a hit game, so, we talk about the franchises that were starting to establish during our childhood. You talk about the Marios and the Zeldas, right?
The Metroids,
yeah. You were able to sell me some Zelda bed sheets, right? I did own those.
I had the Zelda Watch.
Yeah, you had the Zelda Watch. Or you had, kind of add-ons like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, right? You could say
quality add-ons.
Yeah, very quality. You could have these kind of branding opportunities, but really at the end of the day, this had nothing to do with the game. It just felt like some totally random merch or kind of a cheap actual spin-off of really what the meat and potatoes of the core product was. So really, Chris, we kind of went through this first generation with just this idea of I could buy this game or maybe let's try this game.
Right.
But that's really all it was. I remember the first time that I personally took notice and said, wow, like that really grabs my eye and that is something different. Was the first time I saw Earthbound, right?
Yeah.
That was just a physically imposing game. When I saw that on the shelf, it's like, wow, what's that? I want to take a look at what's in that box.
And interestingly enough, I hope I'm not wrong here, but I don't believe there is a big box version in the Japanese side. I think that was something that they did for Western markets, certainly just America.
Stupid Americans who needed a strategy guide.
Well, it's funny. I would love to do. I'm kind of ashamed that we didn't already do that research on that, but I'd love to go back and see if you can figure out exactly why that big box thing happened. Because the NES, they had Gyromite in like a big box, and they had, Rob the Robot or whatever, and those kinds of things, and maybe that did really well. But this big box thing, maybe they were testing, the markets to see if people were interested in it. Because I know, I don't believe it actually moved back out to the East down the way. But now, trying to find one of those big box games is really, really hard to find.
And it's funny because I remember when Final Fantasy Mystic Quest came out, part of how they were trying to make this the American version, they had a pack-in strategy guide that came with copies sold.
That's right.
But it wasn't in Ginormica box. It was just, hey, you get the strategy guide. And so it's like, it was a very interesting thing and decision because obviously it cost them more to make a giant box and it's more able to be damaged on store shelves. And, all of those things that you'd think about if you were actually producing this. But it was something that it started that, especially in the American market, that was something that took notice for a lot of fans. Now, I know, Chris, you have this wonderful item, too, in front of us.
This is interesting.
Tell us about this.
So one of the first times for me, we talked obviously about Super Nintendo era, Earthbound, and other things like that. But for me, one of the first things I ever remember getting very vividly for the PC was one of the first MMOs of all time, arguably one of the best MMOs of all time, Ultima Online.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, I don't have it, but Ultima Online came with a little pewter UO, little piece. It's probably about an inch high or so. And it also, those of you who are listening, I apologize. You might have to go check it out on YouTube.
This is why you need to follow our link to YouTube.
Exactly. Go to YouTube, subscribe to us, take a look. We have a little bit of some visual samples here to show. What I have is actually a cloth map of Britannia that came with Ultima Online. And this is really cool because not only is this a little bit of a lot of role-playing games, in a sense, came with these kinds of things. But the interesting part about it is this is actually the world, you were interacting with. And so as you play around in this world, you can see where other deserts are, where forests are, where other cities are that you'd like to interact with. And that's something that, was both functional for the game, but also the fact that it was cloth and it wasn't paper, I think helped really kind of drive home the fact that this is kind of a little interesting, collector's piece for people who ended up going into the UO thing early.
And it upped that fan experience. It's something that the fact that you have it to this day tells me it worked, right?
It definitely works. I love this thing.
It caught your attention. So let's kind of transition. We go out of this early phase where we have no expectations that there's going to be any added item or thing to kind of distinguish what we're buying. Like you said, you're going to get cartridge, box, manual. That's pretty much it. Then you go into what I call, and this is really where I think that I started to formulate my opinions of what was possible in the industry, what I'll call the working designs effect. Now, again, we have kind of Exhibit B here, which to me is maybe the best example of what they did, but Victor Ireland, in all his wisdom, I think saw that there was this niche market that was, granted, small and niche, but was a really rabid fan base that loved these Japanese RPGs that were coming out, appreciated them, loved the genre, but also really craved that special physical item and said, I don't just want a great game. I want great packaging. I want great artwork. I want embossed manuals, all kinds of things that they experimented with as they would start to release games. But I remember every time I would see that Working Designs logo, I honestly, even if I didn't know what the game was, I would immediately draw to it and just say, wow, maybe I need to give this game a shot.
I basically owned, at one point, almost every Working Designs game ever made. Because I was, it's funny, it was before the quote-unquote internet, and I was on Prodigy, and Vic Ireland was on Prodigy for a while, and we were, there were ways for you to communicate back and forth. This is about the time when they were bringing Lunar, the Silver Star story, to Sega CD, and you're right, Aaron. The thing that was interesting, so this is kind of cross-referencing, so a lot of JRPG people, non-surprisingly, were very big anime fans, and back in early mid-90s, it was extremely hard to actually find anime. You couldn't just go out and find it. You might have some dubs of Akira that had made it over in VHS, and you'd find some of those things in some certain stores, but really it was really hard to find. And so for me, as someone who enjoyed anime and who also loved JRPGs, it was awesome to be able to get that disc, the Sega CD disc, with the beautiful high color artwork, where most CD games were just most of them actually were just unpainted,
right,
with like some horrible like sewer shark or whatever, like just green writing or whatever it might be. These were high quality, very, very colorful discs, along with the embossed manuals you mentioned, and that's something that was really, really the first stage. And I think this is, to your point, this is where Victor Ireland was really starting to push Working Designs in that same era. Games like Pop Full Mail and Ironstorm and other ones that they put out.
Silhouette Mirage, even.
Yeah, I mean, they're awesome games. And try to find, honestly, if you try to collect Working Designs games these days, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to find them. But we do actually have one here that you mentioned, Aaron, that I think is really interesting. And this is, as Lunar became a little bit more advanced, I guess, reworked a little bit for other pieces here. We have a PlayStation version of Silver Star Story Complete, and this one was actually pretty cool in that it has a nice little artwork with it, with information on the characters in there. It's a multi-CD set, and it comes in this nice little box, of course, with the embossed box and everything.
And the one thing I'll note, and this is also the case on Eternal Blue, right? You have this kind of latched case on the front, where it just really, it's this cinematic quality about it, where when you look at this package, every side of it has this wonderful
something
artwork
to look at, and you want to just you want to just kind of pick it up and just kind of turn it all the way around and look at all the scenes and everything on every piece. And you're right. Honestly, unfortunately, I do not have Eternal Blue. It's something I'll probably have to get again at some point. But Eternal Blue is even better with a lot more little nuances.
Has Lucius Pendant.
Exactly.
I own both of these. These were some of the hardest sales out of my collection that I made. Honestly, because I'm not a huge fan of the Lunar series relative to many other RPGs. And so I really didn't have any intention to go back and play them. And I knew there were a ton of huge fans of the series. And I just said, honestly, I want somebody else to own this who cares about the games more. And I had just absolute mint condition ones. And I remember the person that I sold them to. I mean, they were so appreciative of them. And, you kind of hope for a certain quality. And I said that they were complete. But it was literally, if you would have gone to the store and bought it was that good. But it was that kind of item where you looked at it. I remember unpacking it and just looking at the items multiple times. Now, what I think those products did for us, and what I think Working Designs really, started to culminate in the community, was that they proved that there was a physical attachment to the products beyond just actually playing the game, and that there was a fan base that was willing to pay up for quality, right? Because if you look at the average PS1 era game, it was $40 for first party, $50 if it was a third party. And these cost more money, right? You couldn't get them for that, but people gladly paid for these, and they've kind of, I don't want to say flew off store shelves, but this was something that they realized we could do a limited print run of these, and we can sell everything we make, and people will pay us more for it. So fast forward into what started changing. Not necessarily directly because of working designs, but what the kind of the market forces that started to change. Two things I'll really point to that were happening, from the business side. So one, you have Amazon and online retailing start. So right when I have to be, if I'm Babbage's Electronics Boutique, whatever the chains were. If I have to stock stores with tons of different games all over the country, all over the world, wherever it may be, all I want is to make everything the same so that if I have inventory that I have to shift, it's very easy for me to send games to another store, but I know that I'm not going to get stuck with, if I have a store where the customers don't care about the special editions, that store is not just stranded with a bunch of games that they can't sell.
Right,
but if I'm Amazon or if I'm an online retailer and I just have to put a bunch of boxes in a warehouse, well, I can sell globally or I can sell to the entire country. And if I think I can sell 1,000, I don't care who buys them and where they are. I just need to know I can sell 1,000 and I can have as many different SKUs as I can stock. And so, that was kind of thing one where it became a lot less costly for retailers to have multiple options. Two, you have publishers that as we start to go through the generations, they were really looking for ways to raise the average selling price of the games, right? Development costs are going up. They've got to figure out a way to charge more for games without just saying, it costs more, so tough luck, right? They're looking for ways to add some value, but at the same time get paid more for every game they're selling. Another thing that really starts to happen from a fan perspective is that one, when we talked about Mario or Zelda or Metroid, right? When you're talking about the original NES games, there were people who were very quickly fans of those games, but you didn't have a rabid fan base. You didn't have people who literally spent their entire childhood with these franchises and grew up to the point where now that they're working and they have money, they said, hey, what else do you have? What else can you sell me? Like, I love this character. I want all the things Mario. Sell me something with Mario and let me as a fan show how much I love this franchise. Right, fans like you can kind of see it if you're watching this on YouTube. You can see the background if you've ever watched it. Chris and I are people who we have our favorite franchises, and we want the physical thing to show the world that we are fans of these franchises.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's, I don't know. The other thing I think that's happening here is that back in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of a stigma in a sense to play video games, kind of like for a lot of people who are in information technology or you work on computers, you're kind of deemed a nerd. And back in the early 90s, nerd was kind of a little bit of a bad word in a sense, right? Today, obviously, that's changed quite a bit. And, and over the time, I think this is the inflection point where, we used to be, you used not to really tell anyone you played video games because that means, you don't go out and see the world and see the sun and all those kinds of things too, which, arguably some of that stuff is true. But for us, I think as video gaming becomes, and I think to your point, Aaron, as people got older, as adults, adults have always played games.
Sure.
Always. But as the general population started to understand that adults are playing games, and as the curve for people playing games, the median is no longer, 18 or 10 years old or whatever. Now you've got people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. You've got 40, 50, 60s. People are playing, older people are playing games. And as the kids of the 90s and the 80s are now moving into our adult phases, now we are kind of rising the tide, I think, of video game industry, or the industry at this point. And so I think that's what it is, right? Where your point about people having money is big, because when we were kids, if there were collector's editions, like if there was a, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, collector's edition for $40 more, there's no way in heck I'd ever be able to get that, right?
Absolutely.
As a kid. But now, I might actually go for something like that because it has that tie, as you mentioned. And so that's the thing I think where you really kind of start seeing, it wasn't super obvious either. It was an undercurrent, certainly. And then kind of you blink a little bit more, and in the 2000s and beyond, I think partially games like Call of Duty helped do that, I think. You kind of look up and all of a sudden, whoa, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
That's right. And I think another thing that is worth mentioning, and I'll kind of liken this to another industry that saw this, is the car industry. So if you think about the passion for the hobby, as it's grown, there was a point in time where the thought of a car manufacturer building anything other than a base car and saying, all right, you want a Lamborghini, great, we'll build a Lamborghini. There's only so many people out there who are going to ever be able to afford this car. Why would we put ourselves at risk of making more than one of this model, right? Over time, the passion has grown so much, and you have people that say, I am a Lamborghini enthusiast. I am not limited by funds. I have as much money to spend as I want, but I want something that distinguishes me as a Lamborghini fan. So why do they release cars where they're going to build 20 of them, right? You want to be in the club that says, I love this, not just so much that I own one, but I own one of 20 of the special editions, right? That is a badge of honor that only 20 people get. And so if you want to distinguish yourself in the fandom, you're in this kind of category of only a few. And so in video game world, it's the same. I mean, you look at some of these special editions that we talk about, you can easily identify yourself and say, hey, I like Uncharted. And we'll talk about some great examples of this shortly. I love Uncharted, right? But I don't have any of the swag editions, the special editions, where somebody who is really a fan, if they were to roll up and show me, hey, I've got each one of the Uncharted special editions, I would look at that person and say, all right, this must be one of your favorite franchises of all time.
Right.
And I immediately, before I even know how many hours or how many playthroughs or what how many trophies you got on these games, I can just look at the physical object and I know immediately how much passion you have for that franchise.
Well, okay. This is a good point. I want to have a little bit of a slight tangent here, too, before we move on. Because this is something I've always kind of thought of. So we've talked about how we have gone from, there's not really a big thing in the early days. Now it is growing, and say let's kind of fast forward to the last 5 or 6 years where it is a thing. Yeah. I want to show this thing here that I have, that I talked a little bit about Twilight Princess a long time. And for those of you on the podcast, again, I apologize, but you can see we have a Twilight Princess special edition with the, Wolf Link amiibo. And I bring this up because amiibo is something that's very interesting, and Nintendo is doing stuff in my mind that is very interesting as well. And I like your point, your thoughts on it, Aaron. Number one, they are designated. So to your point about kind of collector's editions, like the Lamborghini example, right? Collector's editions typically are things that are limited edition, like there are 20 in the world or what have you. Well, when you come to amiibos, they are pre-designated collector's items, of which they will make hundreds of millions. Right. And they are, people have perhaps rightfully so been very concerned over time that if you designate something with a badge of a collector's edition or whatever, and you mass market it, you are not necessarily building a collector's edition in the spirit of the true collector's edition, in that the select few, the best of the best fans will have that Uncharted, but now everyone in the world has an Uncharted collector's edition, and what does that mean? Yeah,
there's a part of me that says there should be and I appreciate the fact that there is a category where the great unwashed masses of non-Zelda fans, in the eyes of the biggest Zelda fan, just doesn't get to have that thing. Right. I don't have a problem with having limited print run items to just say, okay, you can't have this, and if you want it, you're going to have to pay up for it. Now, we'll go through some examples where this gets into maybe ridiculous proportions, where you just say, if you're going to make this, I don't know that it was smart to limit it quite that much, given the nature of the item. That the dollar amount attached to this is not such that a bunch of people couldn't afford it. So I do think that managing the exact numbers around that becomes difficult. But I am very okay with the fact that there are items that, as I mentioned with the Beatmania special editions, you've heard me buying over the months. I appreciate the fact, and it makes the item more special to me, knowing the great lengths that it took to preserve these items and the fact that there were only going to be so many. So I think that is probably a little controversial, and I could totally understand if our viewers or listeners disagreed. But I think it's cool that there's something out there that you can say, you know what, I have this, and you're not getting it unless you pay me some ungodly sum of money.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I've heard this argument, honestly, largely from collectors of games, like Super Nintendo games, for example. So if I have, or let's say I have a Stadium Events for NES, right? This is one of the rarest quote-unquote production games in the NES that was pulled off the shelves. So that game, maybe it's $10,000. So right now, largely because, they believe that there are very few of them in existence today. And so what people will say is, okay, well, this is a collector's item. This is awesome because at the time it was available, people went out and bought it, and then over time it became very rare. So to your Lamborghini, right? The first edition, the first Lamborghini Countach off the lot in like the 80s or whatever, or off the manufacturing floor, that's going to be special because there's only one of those.
Right.
But what if they said, instead they said, okay, well, we're going to make 1,500 versions of the first Lamborghini off the factory floor. Is it really that special? And so that's my point here. So if you pre-designate something as a rare collector's item, and then you turn, and then in the same breath, you also say you're manufacturing 500 million of these things for global consumption, is it a little disingenuous in a sense, in that you're getting, it's kind of cool stuff, but I've actually been faced with that problem. Like, okay, it's not a problem, I should say. But,
first world problem.
First world problem.
Sure.
But I've looked at it, I'm like, I want to get this because it's cool, but I also kind of feel like I'm being taken advantage of because people have just kind of, instead of collecting something and having it be meaningful to you and slowly over time become meaningful to more people, thereby driving the price up. Instead, it's like company A is making product B and they are telling me it's special and that I need to buy it because it's special when reality doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, let's talk a little bit about what makes a great collector's edition. And I think that, no one-size-fits-all answer here, but I want to talk about some attributes that we started to see as this has really taken off. I mean, if you were to look on Amazon or GameStop or any site out there in terms of how many new releases nowadays have some form of a collector's edition that is available, it's not everyone, but it is starting to feel like it's close to it. Now, obviously, the price points vary a lot.
Right.
The quality level, the how many different versions. There's the collectors, but then there's the super prestige collector's edition. Right. Every game takes a different approach. But let's talk about some of the commonalities. Now, one of the things that I want to get your thoughts on, Chris, because you have great examples on the table. So, Silver Star Story is kind of an example of what I personally enjoy, which is that it is sized in a way that it's a little bit bigger to hold all the extra contents, but if you were to line it up on a shelf with your other PS1 games, it may take up more space width-wise, but it would fit in the row and it would not screw up your organization. Versus something like the giant box. Let's say I have for Persona 5, where that edition, you have to put it in a special place on a special shelf because it does not play nice and line up nicely with all your other games because it's huge. Or Earthbound is like this too.
Right, yeah.
So Chris, what are your thoughts on, do you want the oversized, large and in charge box, or do you just want the high quality, normal sized box?
I think I tend to want the high quality, normal sized box. Okay. However, but it depends on what it is, right? So if one of the special editions was a 7-foot Link, I'd probably buy the 7-foot Link
with the box to surround it.
With the box to surround it. I might do that. So for some of these, like for these big IPs and things like that, I might do that. If I buy, I've actually, I probably should admit this on public, but I've actually looked at buying like a big Master Sword or something like that. That's like full size.
Nice.
Those kinds of things. I think there's a time and place for some of that, but for every collector, and typically collectors are the ones that do that because they have or don't have, as it were, the space. for the things they're buying, your average person is not going to come by and buy a 7-foot link.
Sure.
Right? But your average person might come back and say, oh, cool, I was going to buy Twilight Princess, I was going to buy that anyway, and this one has a cool amiibo, and it has some cool stuff on it, and yeah, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not huge, so maybe I'll just buy that one versus the little horrible, white DVD case kind of thing.
And I've really enjoyed the Steelbook cases. I know that's kind of a controversial area that I think some people don't like it. That is something, I think part of it's just the feel of it relative to plastic. I do like that it has that extra weight. And in a lot of games, the new Yakuza Kiwami, that steelbook was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it has a nice outer sleeve that kind of, depending on where it has artwork, it matches well. And when you pair it with the actual case, it kind of creates this unique artwork that you can see through parts of the sleeve. So there are cool experimentations that have been done with this, but I kind of tend to agree with you. I really want something to fit on the shelf, especially because I don't dedicate an entire room to my collection. I try to have it fit in cabinetry that kind of sits out of the way, and then I have to open up the doors to see it all. So that's just a personal preference that I think everybody feels different about. I mean, I know people who have entire rooms that they really enjoy kind of those showpiece items to say, to your point, if I love this game, this would cap in an aisle, like you think of it, a grocery store, kind of the display case at the end of the aisle. They want those items to really say, hey, have a look at this. Like this will really grab your attention if you were a fan of this. Yeah,
I'm back and forth on Steelbook cases. I like them. The thing I don't like about them, I'll show you an example here. So I have, for those of you watching on the show here, I have a Gran Turismo Sport that I just picked up that has a steelbook case. And what I don't like about these steelbook cases, sadly, is that they all, because they're steelbook and because they scratch really easily, mine came brand new, by the way, scratched to the bottom, which I know some people would probably return. I don't really care that much, but it is, if that were a plastic case, it wouldn't bother me.
You're right.
But they have these little sleeves with all the artwork, the front and back artwork for the game that is along all of them. And what bothers me, I know it's a stupid thing, but it bothers me that I have to slide this sleeve off, put it somewhere to open it and put the disc in, and then kind of play with that. It's dumb, like I said, but it's something that bothers me a little bit.
That's a fair point. So another thing that I think really becomes the highlight of a lot of these packages, and this we're going to spend a little bit of time on, is what I'll call the signature item. So a lot of collector's editions are really coming with, okay, there's some commonalities. You get a nice case. We'll talk about the art book or the soundtrack or whatever. But I would say that the signature item is oftentimes what either sells or does not sell the collection. So let's talk about some of the goods and the bads. So Chris, my favorite of all time. Now, I do not own this game. I almost bought it just for the pack-in item, but I probably actually will just buy the item straight up. It is the Saints Row 4 dubstep gun, Chris. It is the life-size version of the dubstep gun. If you have not played Saints Row 4, you would not be surprised, or if you've played Saints Row, you're not surprised at all that this was a pack-in item. But the dubstep gun, it's such a hilarious weapon that the fact that they made it life-size, to me, like, if you love Saints Row, that is exactly the item that you wanted them to pack in and give to you.
That's so
and
cool.
I appreciate the fact that the pack-in item was both, given the fact that you can't actually fire a gun that plays dubstep and kills people, whatever, that maybe that should be invented. Yet. Exactly. But the fact that they know what their fans latched onto in the game, and they said, hey, we're going to create a physical object of that to where if somebody walks into your room and they're a Saints Row fan, they're going to immediately see that and run towards it and say, like, oh my gosh, you have a real dubstep gun.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. It's cool when a company or a developer or whoever else is building these little, like, add-ons just knows what makes what makes their fans tick. And obviously if it's a big hero game or whatever, you use the big star or whatever, and that pops out typically well. Final Fantasy, if you ever go to Japan, you go to some of these stores and it's like ridiculous how many Final Fantasy characters they have out there. And I think that stuff's cool. It's when you get stuff like Cactrot or whatever in Final Fantasy, or little or Chocobos or Moogles or little small things. Dubstep Gun's another one, like the BFG in Doom would be really awesome to have.
Right.
those kinds of iconic pieces are things that collectors and other folks would really want to bring home and have as a reminder of like the things they've done. And so I love seeing those kinds of things, right? We talk about another one that we've talked about, again, a hero kind of a thing, but, Assassin's Creed 2, right?
Yeah.
Has statues. And we've seen a lot of statues.
And those actually, it's funny because the variation in quality levels on those is often what sinks the ship sometimes. So I know that the Assassin's Creed 2 Ezio statue is very highly sought after. I mean, people loved that game a lot. It sold really well, so there's obviously a large fan base for it. But it was an item where if you just had, even if somebody came into your gaming room, they had no idea what Assassin's Creed was, they would, I think, gravitate to that item and say, that looks really cool, that looks high quality, and it just grabs your attention in a way that you don't even have to know the source material to appreciate the quality of what they created.
Yeah.
Another great example of that was from the Borderlands Handsome Collection, Claptrap. People, I mean, I love Claptrap. He's hysterical. They made a replica of Claptrap that honestly, it looks like they pulled it straight out of the game. It was very high quality. That actually, like the entire package for the Handsome Collection Special Edition was enormous. A huge packaging, lots of pack-in items. But, they cap-ended it with this amazing pack-in with Claptrap. And that was just something where you said, all right, if I'm going to pay extra, I want to get the coolest thing that this series has to offer. And Claptrap was one of those iconic characters. So, Chris, let's talk about where it all goes wrong, right?
Aww.
Because sometimes people kind of screw this up, yet they want you to pay for it anyway.
Yep.
So the most famous example, and I don't know, I hope nothing tops this, but the one that had the most ravenous fan base that completely screwed up has to be the Halo 4 cat helmet. I mean, Chris, the cat helmet, not only when people said, I'm going to be Master Chief. Like, I'm going to get the helmet. I'm going to put this on while I play Halo, and I'm going to feel the live the dream moment in a way. So not only did you immediately realize I only might be able to fit this helmet on my cat if I'm lucky, but Microsoft did you a solid, Chris, and they made sure that when they shipped it to you, it also severely damaged the actual game disc, so you can't even play the game you paid for.
Why would you need to do that when you had a little cat helmet? I mean, come on.
The cat may have done that when he wore the helmet anyway, so maybe it was just a prelude to what they expected your cat to do when it wore the helmet, but it was the ultimate insult to injury. And I remember people being just absolutely up in arms to say, like, I expected this to be the coolest video game object I own, and now not only does the object suck, but I also can't play the game. It was just the epic fail to end all epic fails. Another one that is very controversial that, again, because we're doing the podcast, I'm the person with the microphone, so I get to say that it's a piece of crap, which is the Catherine pack-in.
It's so bad.
Okay, let me level with you, because everybody knows I'm an Atlas fan. Everybody knows that I like the Persona team because they made Catherine. They gave you a game, and Chris, there's no Lunar packaging. You don't need beautiful artwork, Chris. No, you don't need any of that. You don't need just the oversized thing, right? Because you don't want to put that. No, Chris, I want to put a freaking pizza box on a shelf, Chris. A pizza box. No, like, yeah, okay. They're like, no, but that's where you meet in the game. You meet and there's pizza. And no, I don't want my game in a pizza box. Are you out of your mind? Nobody wants a pizza box as their prized possession. But Chris, but no, let's get past that.
Okay.
I can get forward.
Open mind. We're keeping going. Okay.
Let's open the box. What's in the box, Chris? What's in the box? Let's do the Brad Pitt moment. What's in the box? What's in the box, Chris, is a pair of boxers and a stupid T-shirt. What am I going to do with this, Chris? What am I going to do? Pin this on my wall and get put on a list somewhere by the FBI? Like, what am I doing with this? What kind of pack-in is this?
Oh, it's so good.
And everybody's trying, but Vincent wears boxers in the game. I'm like, all right, let's stop being the Sonic fan that just tolerates, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh no!
Stop just tolerating whatever.
Oh, it's over now.
Your Persona team masters give you. That was the most disappointing. Now, Catherine's not a good game. I'm sorry. There are things about it that I like, but Catherine's not a good game. But that special edition was just the laziest pile of attempted fan service that was just cheap stuff. That's all it is. That was an absolute fail. So let's talk about the next clothing-related epic fail. So Catherine was a mediocre game, but Chris, Resident Evil 6 took it to a different level.
Oh, yeah.
Not only did they want to sell you clothing, but they wanted to sell you expensive clothing, Chris. They wanted to They said, no, we don't want to sell our fans boxers. We can do better. Because, Chris, when you think about Resident Evil, we don't need to sell people like the capsule of the T-virus. We don't want to sell them the rocket launcher or like an iconic gun from the Colt Python.
Come on.
Maybe that's a thing. No, Chris, the reason you like Resident Evil is because you have always fantasized about putting on Leon S. Kennedy's leather jacket.
That's right.
And paying hundreds of dollars for it.
Yes, it's yeah.
I mean, it probably doesn't fit, and it's actually
weird
cheap leather that probably was. Come on, people! I mean, Resident Evil 6, as I reviewed it as one of my game assignments, it's an awful game that no human being should ever play. But the fact that I am going to spend hundreds of dollars to also degrade my wardrobe, it's just the dumbest pack-in. It's horrible. Why would you do this?
Oh my gosh.
So Chris, here was the other. We're gonna kind of like bring this back to. If the Halo Master Chief helmet was the live the dream moment, another one that fans even of the non-gaming scene could appreciate. If you love Batman, right, you want the Batarang, right? You want to strike your foes down with the bat-shaped boomerang. And Chris, what did they do when they sold you Arkham Asylum? They said, hey, we're going to give you the Batarang. Right?
Batarang's kind of cool.
Gave you the Batarang.
How could it go wrong?
And everybody was excited. And they saw the promo materials and the pictures of this. They said, oh, I'm in. This is it.
This is awesome.
What they didn't realize, Chris, is when they presented this Batarang to you and they showed it being positioned on a stand where you'd say, okay, they need to make the Batarang stand up so you could see it. We're good. We're good. There's no problems here. What they didn't realize is that they were going to bolt said Batarang to the stand and ship it to where, no, it wasn't going to be something you throw and strike your foes and it returns to you. No, you're just going to bludgeon them to death with the stand. And they were going to not actually make you hold the Batarang as a boomerang. No, they're just going to make it a blunt object.
There's a lawyer behind that. No offense to lawyers, but there's like liability somewhere.
There is a class action
we cannot do this. Some child is going to throw it at his brother and like gouge his eye out.
Yes. We cannot. So instead, let us bludgeon poor Timmy to death with the Batarang on a stand.
Okay. No, this is okay. We're gonna move on. We're gonna address that little gem you talked about a minute ago. I want to talk about it now. I want to talk because let's
go there.
This is good. Because we've talked about good and we've talked about bad. I want the audience to help decide what is good and what is bad. And this is just good. I get it, Aaron. Sonic isn't your favorite game in the world. People don't like Sonic games.
Amy Rose was not a great addition. That's all I'm saying.
There are some good games, okay? So, I bought Sonic Mania recently, okay? Came out, good game. You should definitely go play it if you like those kinds of 8-bit, 16-bit games. So, you go out and you buy the Super Swag Edition. It's like $35, $40. It's not expensive. And
this looks like a Sonic cartridge.
You get yourself a nice Sonic Genesis cartridge right here. This is pretty awesome if you ask me. Now, wait, there's something in it. If you shake it, there's something in it. You pull out the thing here, and you actually get
a secret compartment.
Sonic game? With a ring. And guess what? Sonic likes rings, so there you go. Isn't that kind of cool?
I'm down.
This is a little bit cheap, but this is really kind of a cool thing. I think it's neat for them to come back and actually have an old school Sonic Genesis cartridge with the little ring here and a pull-out cartridge. Now, of course, it would be really cool, be even better if the game actually played and you put it in a Genesis, but that's not it. Okay, but that's not all.
There's more. There's
more. We talked about how it'd be really cool if it worked in a Genesis. Now, it unfortunately does not, but if you didn't have a Genesis, bam, they're going to give you a Genesis.
We got Sonic sitting on a Genesis.
Again, I've mentioned this a couple times on this episode. You should just definitely, if you haven't seen this, mark the time. let's finish this in the podcast. Go home, pull up your phone, whatever. Go to YouTube and look at this. This is crazy cool.
Sonic in an aggressive pose, standing on a Genesis.
This is a Genesis with a fairly decently sized blue hedgehog with red shoes on there. And actually, I'm a really bad collector, and there's like a battery compartment in here. The power button actually does work on this thing, and I assume it does something. I hope it doesn't have some sort of horrible Sonic voice, but I think this is kind of cool. Now, granted, to your point about things being a little bit big, it's huge. Its box is even huger, even bigger. But this is kind of a cool thing for a Sonic fan, I think, to have, a cool little Sonic thing. Yeah, it's really neat. You can put that on your shelf somewhere, and you can have a really cool memorabilia for Sonic in as well as the game you have. Now, I think that stuff is really cool. And the fact that this particular thing was like $40 or something, it's not that bad. I mean, the game itself was $20 or whatever, so I pay a little bit of a premium for these things. But this is really neat stuff, and for someone who is nostalgic about a game that was mediocre, again, not great, I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, audience, please let us know. Tweet at us at BIS Casual Gamers. Look at us. Leave comments on YouTube. Let us know what you think. I really think this is a good pack-in.
Yeah, and I would say, so some of the other features that I think, certainly Working Designs started a lot of this, but that I still appreciate. A lot of games have the pack-in art book. Some better than others, clearly. Some longer than others. You get hardcover versus not. But also a lot of times, some of the behind-the-scenes content, right? All of these things that really help you visualize and understand how the game was created. And I think as a fan, that's material that I always really enjoy. I always watch the videos. I always flip through the art books. It's something that I always have an attachment to. And as I've gotten rid of games over the years, some of them special editions, I always feel like having those items is something that I have a hard time letting go of, because I really appreciate the quality, not even of just my experience playing the game, but knowing what went into making the game. Yeah,
and I've noticed that as a very big trend, and it might be tied to the indie movement, where you have these developer blogs or these devlogs, where people kind of catalog their progress in a game and some of their issues and concerns and how the sausage is made, as it were. I really think this is cool to see this continue and this move forward. So like you said, Aaron, it's like I'm a sucker for concept art. So here's your favorite character in a game, and here are all the iterations that she went through, to be who she was, right? Long hair, short hair, jacket, no jacket, all these kinds of things. Or here's this, Mega Man kind of character, this boss. Here's how the boss iterated over time. And then, see how, and I think this really started, I think, part of it was kind of movie-related. And I remember back in the early 2000s when, Lord of the Rings first came out, the first three movies there, I think that was really cool in that every one of their super special editions they put out, Peter Jackson had put a lot of time into showing how that was made through, like, the CG and the art and all that kind of stuff. And the fans really appreciate that. So now I'm seeing a larger trend where you would probably say that most people back in the 90s didn't care how games were made. They just wanted more games made. They want to play them. I think now, to your point, Aaron, a lot of people look at this and say, I just am fascinated by the process for the composer to put this music together, and how did the story work, and what was left on the cutting room floor at the end of the day that we didn't get, or what, and even developer commentary long term. So what about the game didn't turn out quite how you'd like it? What did you not convey that you really wanted to, and so on.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example. And also I'd say the soundtrack, something that it seems like it's a popular include. I'm kind of the opinion that there are only so many games where I actually want to listen to the soundtrack again.
Yeah.
A lot of times I have a trouble because the game soundtrack in context is great, but you say, okay, if I'm just going to sit here and listen to this without playing the game, it just doesn't feel or capture the same emotion as I would. Part of me is like, I hear the soundtrack and I say, I'd rather just be playing the game, to be honest. I do appreciate some games. Certainly, if you look at Square Enix over time, where I really enjoy listening to the soundtrack on a standalone basis. I think it can make sense, but that's an interesting one that I think has been popular.
It might be more of a regional thing because I know Japan
Yeah.
really, really enjoys their OSTs for their games. And the thing that always got me that was weird, and this might be a very strange statement and probably against the norm, but say like Final Fantasy VI, love the music.
Absolutely.
Would buy that music off the ROM like any day of the week. I want to listen to it as it's played in the Super Nintendo. And I'm not sure I can't recall what the original soundtracks for that one was, but around that time, they were so kind of, I don't know if they were ashamed or what, by how terrible the music kind of sounded in the 16-bit era, that when you went and got the actual OST, it's like an orchestrated version of it. And don't get me wrong, I love the orchestral, those kinds of full orchestras with real instruments and all that kind of stuff and those recordings, but I also kind of just want, like, the ending music for Final Fantasy VI is so much better played through Super Nintendo than it would be played off some orchestra, in my opinion.
So those are some elements of what I'd say was a great collector's edition that people seek. Let's go through some great examples. I'll just kind of run through these quickly, and there's many more. I think that, honestly, to kind of start to tail off this segment, I think that we have seen such an uptick in quality. Now, there's also some misses, as we described, but I think for collectors, people who are serious in the hobby, I think if you enjoy the collector's editions, I mean, we're honestly getting to the point where there's more than most people's budget can stomach in a given year. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot to choose from, lots of options. Some of the best over time, the Uncharted series, people who are fans of that, all of them are great. I would say Uncharted 2, there was a dagger replica pack-in.
Yeah,
it is
cool.
Gorgeous. And cool. It is something now, that now sells for, 10, 20 times its original MSRP. Mm-hmm. Very highly sought after. But that's something that I think that based on how they did the packaging, the quality of the items that went into it, and the fact that it really fits with the flavor of the game, very well done. Also great games. So that's another element that I think is great to look for. Going back to our example of the limited edition Lamborghini, Elemental Gearbolt. Chris, I don't know.
Oh, I remember this. Yep.
This was 50 special items that came in this absolutely amazing Assassin's case. Almost, think of like a hard briefcase. Really beautiful packaging. There were 50 of them that were given out to press only at E3 1998. So you can imagine, there's 50 that were ever made. How many of these were preserved? How many of these were lost? I remember reading, like the price estimate. They were basically like, sell your organs or make a deal with the devil, because I don't know how you're going to get one of these. There's no market price. Like, this is just so you're going to be lucky to even track down somebody who owns one of these because they were so rare. Great example. If you have not been, and we talk about their games a lot on the show, so certainly I feel like we've got a lot of people who could be interested. If you have not been to the Square Enix website or the shop, I would highly recommend every one of our listeners go there. They have quietly done an amazing job of releasing several special editions. One notable one, or two notable ones recently, Nier Automata that, Chris, you played through, and I think I mentioned. There is a swag edition, beautiful box, beautiful statue. I think it sells now for about $800 if you were to try and buy it on eBay. The one that is actually still for sale and is actually marked down as they clear out stock, I want to say it was maybe $120, but check it out on the website, is Final Fantasy XII, the Zodiac Age, the remake that just got released for PS4.
How many have you bought?
All of them.
Okay.
All of
They're
them.
no longer available.
It has some statues of all of the judges from the game. They almost look like chess pieces. Really cool, not too giant in terms of size, kind of a good item that's easy to display. Very nice packaging, but they have a lot of great items on their website. So every time a new game comes out, I'm always looking at the collector's editions and very ready to pull the trigger, assuming that they kind of bring the goods and they have a game that I actually want. Another one that I think is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts are the Fallout games. Fallout 3 and New Vegas did amazing special editions, and really Fallout 3 I think is the pick of the litter, because we talk about items that people remember that are iconic in the game. it came with a replica of the Pip-Boy, the armband that people, it was your entire connection to the Fallout universe. And I remember the first time I saw it,
cool.
I just said, like, that was so smart, and it looks so cool, and it's exactly what fans wanted. So again, because those are just a few examples of some great special editions, we'd love to hear from you, the audience. What physical items are you most proud of in your gaming collection? What are kind of those chase items that you wish you had?
Yeah.
What are some things, what are games that are maybe upcoming or ideas that you have for if you're a fan and you see an item or a game coming in the future, what if you had the special edition or collector's edition design of your choice, what would be in it? So we'd love to hear from you. So hit us up on Twitter at BISCasualGamers or find us at businesscasualgamers.com. We'd love to hear from you, the audience. Comment on the YouTube video now that you are going to watch
Sonic
Giant
statue
Sonic.
if you like Sonic statues.
We can get a movement going to bring the old hedgehog back.
There we go.
So with that, Chris, we're going to get into our game assignments. So I mentioned at the top of the show. So Chris, what are we talking about this week?
Aaron, you were playing Culdcept Revolt, and this is one of those games that, like I said, we've kind of talked about off air for a little while, and it's a really interesting kind of a thing. So, Aaron, I'm really interested in what you thought about this.
All right, so let me make it. This is a game where I think few enough people have probably heard of Culdcept, where I'm going to give a little bit of background description on what is this. So, Chris, we've all played Monopoly, right? I'd say pretty much most people who are listening to this podcast are at least familiar with how a game of Monopoly works. So, Chris, imagine yourself playing a game of Monopoly where there were really two key distinctions. One, it solves the classic Monopoly problem of the game never ending by ending the game when one player reaches a certain net worth. So, right, let's just say I haven't completely bankrupted a player, but I just own so much stuff that there's kind of a mercy rule built into it, right?
Okay.
And two, and this is really to me the key distinction of the game, where if you own a property and normally I would have to pay rent to you, instead of landing on that property and paying rent, I can actually engage in a Magic the Gathering style duel using a collectible card game format where if I win the battle, I not only don't pay rent, but I actually take over the property from you.
Whoa.
So you take something as simple. The first one people could kind of conceptualize and say, like, hey, that actually may be a good change to Monopoly that would make the games end quicker. But the second one is crazy because you've got this push and pull where you say, well, wait a minute. I had this property and I was going to collect rent, but now the tables have completely turned and you stole this thing from me.
Yeah.
And if there was a hotel on it, I just own that hotel now.
Ooh,
and if you land on it and you can't
scary.
beat me, you get bankrupt. So, I remember the first time I played this and I heard this described to me. It just kind of blew my mind. I said, wow, that's really interesting, and I don't even know what I think that's like, but I want to give it a try, and I was pretty hooked. This, for those who are not familiar with it, it's actually a fairly long-running series in Japan. It's had some, I'll call it under-the-radar releases. I own the PS2 version, but there's also a fairly popular Xbox 360 version, Culdcept Saga. So it's had some releases in the U.S. along the way, but none of them have sold particularly well. So who is this for? Because I think that's always a very important distinction. So, Chris, you and I grew up. We've played board games. We also played Magic the Gathering, which I think is the best comparison because there's a lot of similar features to that. And I won't get into all of the rules. But I would say if you're a person who has ever liked the collectible card game model and deck building games, and this kind of a lot of times more speaks to the paper or the tabletop game world. But I think if you've ever really had an experience playing deck building games, collectible card games, and you've enjoyed them, I really think that this is a game that you might enjoy. I think that it's a cool enough rules twist, and I think there's enough spice in the game to keep it interesting, where if you like that sort of thing, I think you might really like it. If you don't like it, though, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, I'm not sure that it's going to convince you to like it, but I do think that there's a large enough cross-section of video gamers who also dabble in the tabletop world that might like this. So
interesting, okay.
Let's talk about one of the other things that I think is cool relative to Magic or some of the other card games, where the biggest complaint of those games is that if I'm a new player and I go into one of those games, right, and I show up to Friday Night Magic or something like that, if I just kind of buy an intro pack and show up, I'm going to play against players who have this super tuned deck, and I'm going to get stomped, right? That's just how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And maybe they just draw totally horribly and they lose, but it's going to be
Very
from
rarely.
pure bad luck and pure great luck on my part. Culdcept is a game where it balances out in its rules. It balances the deck building mechanic enough to where even somebody that doesn't have all the cards, and again, you don't have to pay with real money. You unlock cards as you play the game. So it's very, it's not something where, there's anything more than the cost of the base game to continue to play this. But somebody who's been playing a while, if you were to play them in a versus battle, they're probably going to have access to clearly a larger card pool. But those matches aren't completely lopsided, and you can still win. And that's something that as a new player, especially if I was interested in playing in a multiplayer, kind of player-to-player environment, that's something that I would definitely appreciate, the fact that I wouldn't get stomped for being a noob. Because I think that intimidates most people from playing anything where there's an online or competitive aspect.
It's that, and it's the... like when we talked about Call of Duty as well, and this is a random aside for it, but, you come into a game where, everyone's been playing for a month, and all of a sudden you come in, you get destroyed. With Magic the Gathering and those kinds of card games, it was kind of a pay-to-win in a sense, right? So there was an amount of money, you could go out and like the hottest deck configuration right now, based on the pool of cards available, you go out there, you throw some money at that, you buy all those cards, now you have the best deck. And you're right, I mean, that was something that, in my mind, was really, I struggled. I struggled with those kinds of things because I didn't have a lot of, well, it's not that you didn't have enough, even if you did have the money, and you didn't want to spend it, it was just kind of not super fun.
Right.
But I have a question, and this is kind of related back to the CCGs, the deck building stuff we've talked about. There have been some games in the past, Magic the Gathering, I think, has done decently well over time, but I remember when World of Warcraft actually came out, that tradable card game, when its very first iteration in like 2006, 7, 8, whenever it came out, I noticed, and one of the things that was so frustrating about it was there were very interesting kind of, ends of the spectrum in a sense. So if you were playing, I'm going to say class, but if you were playing a type of deck A, and I was playing type of deck B, and A is just like is a counter for B, then you're just going to lose flat out.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found out, like you might say, if you're playing a fire deck and I'm playing a water deck's going to win because water puts out fire and fire can't hurt water. That's the hard part, because for me, when I see that you're playing the water deck and I'm playing a fire deck, I just want to go home because I know it's going to lose, right? So the best games, and I think Magic the Gathering had balanced over time this very well, is that, yeah, you might have better cards, yeah, you might have that water deck, and I have a fire deck, but I still have a good chance of winning if I am still clever with how I do things, I bait you into things, or what have you. It's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, and I think that is a benefit. So there is kind of a color pie or color identity or kind of deck themes, if you will. But even though they all play different, I have not encountered something yet where I feel like one archetype is clearly superior. Now, clearly, as you play the game and you unlock new cards, it helps flesh out a strategy to say, okay, if I have these cards, these work well together, and this helps me go deeper into this strategy that I want. But I've never felt to this point that, even though I like playing the fire deck in this game, I've never felt like that is just a clearly superior choice to everything else. It just more suits my play style. So I have not,
That's great.
Again, this was the case for the PS2 version as well. I think the fact that this has been a long-running enough series, you've seen the benefits of that balance over time, where they know what works and what doesn't work.
That's great.
And so I think that's been a very nice addition as they continue to refine the game. Now, the one thing I'll caution for people who are familiar with any of these game rules that we're talking about, at its best, you are having fun because there's this ebb and flow, this back and forth, and you have all these signature battles over territories as people start to kind of build up their holdings, if you will. Those moments are great because you feel like you're trying to avoid rolling the dice and landing on that one expensive spot. But even if you do, you try to pour all your resources into making sure that you win this one key battle, and it's going to be the difference between winning or losing the match. Those moments are awesome, but because it is a board movement where you're rolling dice and you go a certain number of spaces, and the game ends once somebody hits a certain net worth, there are certain games when it feels more like Settlers of Catan, or you're almost playing solitaire, where it's like, hey, I'm doing my own thing. Yeah, it's competitive, and then I'm trying to reach my goal first, but I'm kind of doing my own thing. You're doing your own thing, and I rolled a little bit better than you, and so I just win, and that's kind of the game. Those moments, there are times when you feel, I don't want to say cheated, but you do feel like you wish it was a little bit more interactive with the opponent.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is something
Makes
that I'd
sense.
say, Magic, obviously, there's very few games of solitaire. Monopoly also, because there's no end, has that natural balance built in. That may be the one downfall that I noticed as I went back to this game, is that there are those moments where you just kind of feel like, I don't feel like I really had a chance to get back in the game.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know if that would really turn me up. Might actually turn me off to the point where I wouldn't play.
Sure.
But yeah, I tend to like games that are, to your point, kind of balanced and fair. And I know many games, it's so hard to do that. Very, very few games actually are that balanced and that fair. But those kinds of things do really kind of drive me down in a sense. The World of Warcraft game I told you about, I had played it with some colleagues, a while back, and we hit on that very same thing, like the water fire deck kind of balance issue, the archetype balance issue, caused me to just kind of put the game. I closed my book. I was done with that game from that point on. So, and not to say that I kind of nonchalant, I frivolously or whatever just kind of throw games to the side at the end, but I do have to have a feeling that what I'd love to be able to say is that 90% of the time a winner walks away from a game, they played the game better that round than the opponent, right?
Yeah.
And that's just why in some of these games, too much random chance, there's a little bit of like, okay, well, people playing PUBG right now, for example, it's a battlegrounds, battle royale kind of game where you parachute in with 100 people, you get guns and weapons and whatever, and you kill everyone else, and if you're the last person standing, you win. Very similar thing. Whereas if you land next to a place with a whole bunch of guns and a whole bunch of ammo, and your opponent next to you didn't, guess who's coming out of that alive? And it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm better or worse. You could be the best player in the game, but the fact that you landed in a position that didn't have good random or RNG kind of stuff, you didn't have the better gun, you're gonna walk losing, and that's the thing I can't stand in the end.
That makes sense. So let's talk for the three people in our audience who may have played Culdcept before. Let me speak to the improvements over past versions. So one of the things that I will definitely say is there's every now and then there's that game where you just say, if I had this on a portable system, it would just be so much better. This is absolutely one of those games where I will tell you, it is so nice to have this on the go, to be able to take this with you, because it is really conducive to, you open up the 3DS and you play a couple of turns, you close it up, you go. It's very easy to jump back in and out of the game without feeling like, oh, what was I doing? Where was I going? It is a perfect portable game. And honestly, even if they did this on mobile phones, and maybe they have this on mobile phones and I'm not aware, but this is a game that has that very bite-sized quality to it that I think makes it great on this system. There is a much better tutorial than past games to get you into the core mechanics of the game. That was something that, again, I don't feel like it's a difficult game, but there are enough things going on where without some context or explanation or somebody there to tell you, okay, well, here's how this works, the tutorial has helped that along a lot. Now, I will say, once you get deeper into the game and there start to be, like I'll call keyword abilities for different cards that you kind of need to know to play at the more advanced level, that becomes a little bit busier, and then you have to keep track of more, and you can get to the point where I always call it like you have battles that are resolved and you say, oh wait, I didn't know that was going to happen because I didn't know that this card would stack with this. Now, the game has done a great job. They put basically an AI feature in there where the AI, it won't act for you, but it will show you what it would choose to do. I have actually left that on because it's been a while since I played the game and I was just curious to see how the feature would work. It does a very good job. There have been battles where I kind of look at it and I say, I don't know that I can win this. But then it suggests using a particular card, and then when I see how it interacts with my, whatever is going to happen, I end up winning. I say, okay. I wouldn't have seen that.
Yeah.
And so it really does, if you just pay attention, maybe you make a different decision, but if you pay attention to what the AI is choosing, it actually indirectly teaches you how to play the game better.
Interesting.
So I think they did a very good job of programming that in, and it will get you to an advanced level of play faster than honestly any other resource I could imagine. So very well done on that. I will say that for people who played the spell card type, so there's creatures, there's items that can be equipped in battle, and then there's spells. The spells are much more varied in this one, to where there's a lot of different ways that when you build a deck, lots of kind of quirky abilities that you could experiment with, that in past games it kind of felt like the same type of effects with, it's like, okay, well, you can have your opponent move 3 spaces to land on your awesome space, or there's another card that'll just move them 1 space. Mm-hmm. But there seemed like there were only a few variations on the theme, where this really opens up the playbook a little bit more. I will also say, to go with the theme of our episode, or the main discussion topic, I bought the special edition of this. They did an A+ job on this special edition.
Oh, really?
It is on my shelf. It has got, not only does it have great outer box, pack-in game, art book, has soundtrack. It has foil versions of some of the cards in a nice sleeve. They did just an absolutely excellent job producing the special edition. So for $20 more, I would highly recommend it. Now, Chris, let me talk about the bad. Nintendo cannot do online still.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you're shocked.
What?
But oh my gosh, I'm like, it is 2017. How is Nintendo still figuring this out? The shop to be able to download character avatars and all this, it's still garbage. I cannot believe how long it took me to download free DLC. It was embarrassing. Every time we go through this, I'm like, Nintendo, figure it out. Everybody else knows how to do this except you. I didn't have to do a friend code yet, but this is just getting to the point where it is laughably bad. And Nintendo, if they're going to succeed with portable consoles, they've got to figure out wireless. They've got to figure out connectivity with people nearby. This is embarrassing. So figure it out, Nintendo.
Ooh, okay.
So the next thing is the story. So they have a story mode that is built around this. And Chris, I honestly, because I flipped through the art book first, I at least knew what was coming.
Oh, no.
But Chris, they packed this game full of all the hot waifu content that you could imagine. This is waifu central.
No.
So much, more so than Fire Emblem. All the waifus, Chris. Every variety of waifu fantasy that you might have, they thought of it. And they included a
Do you have to blow into
ridiculously
any sort of
character.
controller or anything?
There was no blowing into the 3DS. But oh my gosh, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. So, needless to say, after reading a little bit of dialogue, it is Japan the game in a way you would expect from every Japanese archetype game. It was nonsense. Luckily, they allow you to press the start button to skip all the story content, which after about 5 minutes, I liberally started doing, and I do not care what is going on in the story.
Yeah.
So there's that. Now, again, kudos to you for allowing me to skip it, but you could have just skipped it altogether. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the AI may be training you at times, but there are times as you're learning to play this game, you have this, I thought I had this battle taken care of, and then the AI did this thing that I wasn't expecting, and now I lost, and I feel like cheated. Now, you learn in those moments. Again, somebody could say, well, just get better at the game, and they're not wrong, but I will tell you as a new player, there is enough there that can be intimidating where it might discourage someone if you're not going to use the AI option, that they just say, oh, I'm not having fun because I don't understand what's going on. And so there are those moments that I do have to caution people. You may experience that, and you've got to make the decision of how long you want to press on and what you think the learning curve might be. I think it's fairly beginner friendly to still enjoy this game, but I don't want to discount the fact that even I have those moments as somebody who knows how to play the game. So if I'm experiencing those, I have to believe that a new player may have those moments where you just say, I feel robbed. I don't want to play this anymore. So, buyer beware from that.
So in the end, would you recommend the game?
Yeah. So here's who I would recommend it to. I think that if you're a collectible card game fan and the rules that I just laid out at the top of my commentary, if that sounds interesting to you and you've got some experience in card games, I think you might love this game, so give it a try. So that's kind of person number one. Number two, I think if you travel a lot and you're looking for great bite-sized games, and again, if this sounds interesting, or even if you say, well, I'm not quite sure, but I am the type of person that I'm a business casual gamer, so I maybe have uneven playtime. I can't sit down for hours. This is a great portable game that you can pick up, put down 20 minutes later, have a good time, play it on your time. If you got 20 minutes, you'll have fun. If you have an hour, you'll have fun. If you're that type of gamer who always just says, I need more of these in my life, and I'm willing to give it a try, and maybe it's not a hit, maybe I don't love it, but I can sell it back or trade it in if not, and I'm willing to give it a chance because it supports my lifestyle, I think this is one of those games that is a great kind of lifestyle game. So I do think that a traveler or somebody who has sporadic game times could really appreciate what this game is.
Okay, so that's interesting. I mean, it seems like a very interesting game to me. The only problem is the story. I just don't have any interest in any of that stuff. Bad. In fact, it turns me off a lot. I just don't really, I have to think about that. But in the end, it sounds very interesting. It's a very, I can't even describe how unique that particular kind of setup is. Yeah. And combined with kind of the card game kind of back and forth, collectible card game back and forth and battles thing, it sounds cool to me. So it's something that maybe I would like to test out one day, but we can just have to see if maybe they'll patch out the story.
Well, maybe a future Business Casual Gamers BCG Plays episode, we will maybe we'll check this out. But give it a try. It is permanently on my shelf, so I'm glad I played it. Good assignment. So Chris, I have to get in a little bit of a rant, just a short one, but for the game that I will be assigning you this week, I had a Nintendo Switch, a special edition, a collector's edition, in my cart on Amazon.
In the cart.
Ready to go.
It's getting serious.
I was ready. And it was for the game that I will be assigning, which is Mario Odyssey.
Yes.
But Chris, here was the problem. I had the color combination. I'm a UGA guy, so it had the red and black, had the Mario colors. I was ready. I was ready to go. And then I saw in the text where they said the game is a DLC voucher and there is no physical pack-in of the game.
What?
And I promptly hit delete from my cart and cried myself to sleep.
You're paying extra for that. And you're not getting the game. You're not actually physically getting the game.
And I want the physical thing. Yes, it's nice that you're going to sell me the Switch, but I want the game on the shelf.
Wow.
Is this that hard?
That's a big
Nintendo?
oversight.
So, Chris, I did not buy the collector's edition. I refuse to. I will probably get a Switch.
You should get the Switch.
But Chris, really since I do not have the Nintendo Switch to enjoy with all my Mario goodness, you're going to take one for the team, and I'm sure enjoy yourself. But I am a huge Mario Galaxy fan. I loved those games. I am very curious to see that this is kind of the next big release. I really want to hear your opinion. I know you go back as far as I do with the series, and I trust your opinion on this. I know our viewers and our listeners want to hear this. So, Chris, you're going to take one for the team. And you are going to be the canary in the coal mine on the new generation of Mario.
If I have to, you know what?
I twisted his arm.
You are twisting my arm, and I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking about how much we owe to them, and how it's so great that they're here to help us, and the least I can do to help repay them is to play this game.
Now, I will say that giant, aggressively positioned Sonic that is sitting on the table with us, he doesn't look happy. Now, I know he cooperated both in Smash Brothers and in Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, so there has been some reconciliation, but he doesn't look happy, Chris.
He's going in his box, and he's going in the closet.
Probably where he belongs. But but Sonic burned before the end. So with that, we're going to bring the episode to a close. So again, best way to find us, if you like this show, we would love if you'd take the time to give us a quick rating, give us a quick review. We would also love if you'd hit us up, tell us your collector's edition stories, your likes, your dislikes. Hit us up at businesscasualgamers.com, at BIS Casual Gamers on Twitter, and we will see you next episode.
Thanks all.